Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Mirror of Intimacy webinar. It's Monday, June 6th, and our topic is discrimination. So a few things before we get started. I want to remind you to type your questions into the Q&A box as usual, and I'll answer those as we go along, and also to please leave us your book reviews or comments on Amazon for Mirror of Intimacy. Let us know what you love about the book, what you like about it, if you got it as a gift, gave it to a friend. Really, one sentence is plenty. We really appreciate those reviews from you. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our channel by clicking the blue subscribe button below so you never miss a post. You can also keep up with what we're doing by following me on Instagram at Katehakis or at Center for Healthy Sex. So the quote for today is a little odd. It's by Henry Carey, and it reads, "Of all the girls that are so smart, there's none like pretty Sally. She's the darling of my heart and lives in our alley." So you might be wondering, like me, about what that has to do with discrimination. But I think it will make more sense as we go through this conversation today that he's really making a discrimination that she is the smartest girl and she is the prettiest girl and that she is the darling of his heart, even though she lives in our alley, or his alley, as it were. So there are a lot of contradictions in this, but you can also hear an adoring sentiment to it that makes her his special person. And discrimination has several definitions. So I want to clarify which one we're going to be talking about today. The first one is, unfortunately, the one we hear the most, which is about prejudice, as in an outlook or action typically towards another individual. We hear discrimination used a lot when it comes to racism and profiling, especially against people of color in our country. It's also the practice of discriminating categorically. So someone might say, I hate all dogs, or I'm afraid of all black cats, or something along those lines. So that's where you can hear discrimination, in a secondary way. The definitions that I'm interested in is the quality or power of finally distinguishing something. So it's the act of making a difference between A or B or C, or D or E. And discrimination stresses the power to distinguish and select what's true or appropriate or even excellent for us, just like Sally. So if you think about music, for example, if you listen to music over and over and over again, you start to finally discriminate what you like about that particular genre of music. If you're into gastronomy, you become very discriminatory about the kind of food you like. Or let's pick a genre like sushi. You go to every sushi place in town and you have a palate that discriminates good sushi from bad sushi. And that would hold true for people that were wine connoisseurs or connoisseurs of any other thing. And so we want to be discriminating when it comes to what we want and what we need. And when our walls of prejudice block other human beings, that we block their light, we block their value, we block actually who they are, because we're so busy being shut down behind this defense of discrimination, we can seek out, sometimes unconsciously, subversively, or meaning even illicitly, to start to create a profile of what we deem inferior. And many of us have fantasized about or gotten involved with people we would never take home to our parents, because we're going against some discrimination that we learned or was told to us, even though we crossed that lines ourselves. So if you are a certain ethnicity or religion or race, and the messages you got from your family of origin is that you should marry within the clan, within the race, within the religion, within the ethnicity, and you, quote, rebel against that, and you go out of that box, you maybe had a really good time and a fun time because you were connected to that human being, not to the stereotypical norms of what you were told is wrong, bad, etc. about that person. And so you feel like, wow, I'm really starting to fall in love with this person, or I really like this person as a best friend, but I can't really take them home to my parents. And you have to ask yourself, is that reluctance really based on the person or on your prejudice? And while I don't want to completely deconstruct tradition or morality or values that people hold, I do want to challenge them. That's one of the things that, makes California such a great place to be, because we were sort of founded or refounded again in the 60s, where the slogan was, do your own thing, go find yourself, be your own person. And so all sorts of societal norms were broken at that time, and traditions and ideas. And yet we're still very much hamstrung by those, because there's such a power and a pressure by the larger culture. And certainly with the factions that are strongly developing now in our country about right, wrong, good, bad, white, brown, or black, it really has to create an invitation, I think, for all of us to think more critically about these divides and those types of discriminations. So when we judge or we divide, it sets us in a prison of our own making. These are all, psychological constructs. They're all even artificial constructs when it comes to belief systems. There's no way to prove these belief systems. When I think about, for example, Christianity, I remember once, many, many years ago, going into an actual bookstore because I thought I would want to read the Bible. And I was shocked to see there must have been 500 at least versions of the Bible. And in that moment, I realized that, wow, this is an interpretation of something. Somebody has created judgments and divides and made opinions and interpretations and ideas of this thing called Christianity. And how was I possibly going to choose one of those to, quote, believe in? So that is the sort of divide that I'm talking about, or the critical thinking I'm talking about, is that you have to deconstruct these things for yourself. So what are the messages that you got from your family of origin about who was okay to be with and who wasn't okay to be with? And sometimes those are sound messages. I'm not saying they're not. Sometimes we come full circle, but we want to experiment and try things on and find out who we are so that we can make informed decisions. So I want to remind you that you can chat your questions or type your questions in the chat box or the Q&A box, and I'll do my best to answer those for you. And that you can also find us at centerforhealthysex.com. So when we really meet everybody from this place of vitality, really seeing the light in everybody, and we start to recognize that light in everyone, that is vital for our human existence and coexistence with each other. And that's one of the things that disturbs me the most right now about our socio-political divides, is can we meet every human being with curiosity? Can we be interested in listening in what they have to say, why they're thinking the way they're thinking? And can they or us in kind respond by being curious and listening to understand the other person? So that we're starting to see everyone as a light being that has a right to be here and a right to their opinions, because increasingly we really don't know what's what anymore because of the amount of news and information that's being purveyed. How do we situate ourselves in our reality? What are our perceptions, and what perceptions do we want to carry? Do we want to carry perceptions of hostility and divide, or do we want to carry perceptions of unity and light? So in order to discriminate wisely, we need to see our own and other people's true natures. Just because we want to open our hearts and open our eyes and open our minds to honor all of life doesn't mean we should open our arms, our homes, and our wallets either. And I think a lot of us have gotten in trouble, especially with sex and love issues, by overlooking things and not being discriminating. And so this is, again, one of those paradoxical issues where You can see the light in someone, you can see their humanity, but you can also see that they are hostile or dangerous towards you. And so that doesn't mean that you bring them into your home and offer them a shower and food or give them all your money either. Even Mother Teresa could transmute all personalities in order to share her unconditional love. So that's one thing, but she didn't necessarily adopt everybody that she came into contact with. But most of us are going to strive and work hard to balance these dual capacities for clarity and self-care, for charity and self-care, for kindness and giving and self-care. And this is especially true when you're dating. Just because you like somebody doesn't mean that you have to get involved with them. It also doesn't mean that you don't have to tell them it doesn't work for you because you don't want to hurt their feelings. And I want to sort of pause on that point because I think this is a very big problem in the dating world because I hear it over and over again. People get on a site, they go out with somebody, maybe 2, 3, 5, 10 times. Sometimes they have sex, sometimes they don't, but they figure out it's not going to work out for them because they've been discriminating. They've made a very clearly fine-tuned decision that something fundamental about this person is not going to work long-term for them. And rather than be honest with the person about it, one of two things happens. Nothing. They ghost the person. They don't say anything, which we all know is weird to be on the receiving end of. Or they tap dance around how it's about me and not you, and I'm not really ready for a committed relationship right now, or some half-baked excuse that's incredibly transparent to the other person because we've all been on the receiving end of that statement. Instead of just saying, if you're open to this and you really want to hear why I don't want to see you anymore, I'm willing to tell you. And to be willing to tell that person in the kindest, most responsible way person by using I statements, by saying, there are some things I observed in you that I would be very triggered by or wouldn't be good for me in the long run. So for example, one of the things I notice is that you're late all the time. And I have a lot of anxiety about being on time and getting in place on time. So being with someone that's late all the time is going to drive me crazy. And so you can either take that information and make that adjustment because maybe other people have told you you're late all the time, or you can say, wow, that's your anxiety and I don't want to be with somebody who's so anxious that they can't give me latitude of 15 minutes every time we're going to do something. And so can you see how that is actually helpful to the other person? If they are going on a bunch of dates and a bunch of people are ghosting them, or they're not talking to them, or they're saying they're just not ready for a relationship, but the real issue is this person is late all the time, wouldn't it be a gift? Wouldn't it be a nice thing to tell that person that that tardiness is a real problem for them so they can actually look at it and make a change? So that is the difference again between taking care of yourself and taking care of the other person without hurting their feelings, but being honest with them. Invalid discrimination really requires self-knowledge. It requires that we know ourselves, because if we don't know ourselves, we can't possibly communicate that to the other person. We've all heard this term trauma bond, which explains the attraction between people who share similar or different psychological damage. There's an old saying that the bite fits the wound. And that becomes a trauma bond. People that get in relationship with each other, they can't get out of a relationship with each other. They don't, they put up with an awful lot. I think we saw that in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trials recently, where we saw two very unwell people that were battering each other both verbally and physically, but they couldn't let go of the relationship because in some ways they actually get off on that kind of psychological banter, sort of sadistic and masochistic ways of being with each other. And that harkens back to historical or psychological damage that's really been untreated. So another torrid relationship was Romeo and Juliet. If you recall, they had this impulsive affair. It was completely against what both of their families wanted. It's usually cited as the epitome of true love, but it's more a tale of trauma bonding and a tale of love addiction, I think, because they were willing to destroy everything they had, including themselves, for each other. I mean, really taking it to the nth degree of a double suicide. And so we can only perceive in others the qualities we've perceived in ourselves. So if I can't see my own tendency towards overlooking red flags, then I'm not going to see the red flags in the other person, because I'm always going to be compensating for those. I'm always going to make it okay for them. And then if I haven't worked through those issues, then I'm going to work them through, or work them out, if you will, on others. So many profess attraction to like rebel types. And those types, well, there's the bad boy or the bad girl, or there's the, overly nice people. Those are the people that seem like they're perfect and they're different from anybody else I've ever chosen. But to someone else, that nice person might not seem so nice. And the rebel might seem kind of conformist. But willfully choosing bad over good people's things or behavior is sort of a personal delusion, the result of unexpressed desire, or meeting unexamined conditioning, or illuminating how we discriminate, really helps us define deeper values. So this goes back to perception also. What you perceive as rebellious, I might perceive as status quo. And as what you perceive as really nice, I might perceive as someone who is deeply disconnected from their rage or their anger. So I just want to clarify what I was talking about there. And so when we understand how we make these discriminations, actually, it can help us define what our deeper values are, the things that might guide us to seek what's truly, truly good for us. And that's the thing that I most wanted to point to here today in this webinar on this topic, is that it's extremely important that we define these deeper values for ourselves, and that we let those guide us. And no matter who's sitting in front of us, no matter how attractive they look or seductive, or how much money they might be giving us, is it really a good fit? Does this feel right in my body? Is this person showing up in a particular way? Do they take a victim stance whenever they talk about something, or are they actually taking responsibility for their lives, for who they are, for being late all the time? I mean, if somebody's routinely late and they apologize for it and they say, this is a problem and I'm working on it, this is why I'm late, this is what I know about that, then we might actually have something to work with. But if they just don't see it, they don't get it, they just look at you sort of like a dog who's not sure what you're talking about, you should definitely be discriminating and move on. Okay, any thoughts or questions about any of this? I noticed that there are no questions in the chat box. I think, Melissa, you might want to remind people that if they want to write to you privately, where they can find you. And also, if you have any questions for an intake counselor, you can call us at 310-843-9902. So someone asked a question, how do you start using the power of distinguishing something, like people or relationships, when your upbringing was filled with codependency? Well, that's a really great question. And I think you have to start slowly. Codependent people are really honed and geared and trained towards tracking the other person all the time, to anticipate their every need, and to automatically freeze or retreat or do a workaround to accommodate that person. And so the first step is starting to get very clear about how that operates in you, so that you start to notice, like, oh, I'm doing that. And even though you notice you're doing it, you might do it anyway, but at least you notice that you are doing it. So that act of noticing starts to give you a tiny bit of space in there to maybe have the experience a second time or a third time, but by the fourth time comes around, you're going to be so upset, like, wow, I keep doing that thing. You'll actually intervene on yourself. Another quick way to do this is start to own your no. So sometimes it's helpful just to put, an index card in your backpack or your bag. And knowing that if you're going to go talk to somebody or you're on the phone with someone, you just take the index card out and put it in front of you with the big no on it. The other thing under no can be, let me think about that. So when you're on the phone with somebody, if they ask you if they can borrow your car, you don't have to say yes or say no with some 5-minute explanation about why you don't want to. You can just say, let me think about that and get back to you, and then get off the phone and think about or notice how nervous you are, how hard it is to say no, and why you are privileging that person's needs over your own. And ask yourself, who's it going to be, me or them? Who am I going to take care of today, me or this other person? Who am I going to let drive my car that doesn't have insurance today? Why do I think that's a good idea? So go through these different steps in order to create a space for yourself, so that you can give yourself some space to start to slowly but surely make different choices and be discriminating in different ways. Someone writes, my wife and I are having conflict of sexual desire. In many ways, it's a classic question of one partner wanting more sex than the other, but we're working through the issues through the lens of better understanding our past issues of codependency and addictive sex patterns. Well, that's helpful, but I think it's also important to realize that these positions of low desire and high desire exist for good reason. And until you talk about what those are, why one person, because this mismatched desire is probably the most common complaint that people have with each other. And typically the person with lower desire is not having the kind of sex they want, but they won't say because they're busy caretaking to the other person, or they have no idea what kind of sex they want. So they can't possibly answer that question. So they just keep putting the person off. So I'm happy to hear that you're having conversations. And the high desire partner also has to ask themselves, why am I chasing someone who's not interested in me? Why do I keep putting pressure on them to perform when clearly they don't want to? And how do we make this a we problem instead of a you problem or a me problem, which it sounds like what you're doing. So good for both of you. And I would encourage you to keep talking about these issues and to keep talking about what kind of sex you want to have today. What kind of sex life would your wife like to have that she's avoiding sex with you now or not interested in it? And if she doesn't know the answer to that, it's incumbent upon her to figure out the answer to that so she can deliver it to you so you know what you need to do to accommodate that, or so that you can work it out together. Someone says, yes, face-to-face conversation and phone conversations are some of the hardest places to state my no. It's just so automatic to say yes. All right, so the phone conversations should actually be easier with my index card idea, or a post-it where you've just got no posted someplace. And underneath no, the next bullet point is, let me think about that and I'll get back to you. And if you can just start practicing saying, let me think about it, that's going to be a huge win for you. You will feel so much better about yourself, because then you can call a friend, a sponsor, if you're in CODA, and work it through with someone else. And then just notice how nervous you feel or scared you feel, and how out of proportion it is that you can't simply draw a line in the sand for what's good for you because the other person is making you feel intimidated or like somehow they're more important when they're not. So I'm really glad you've asked these questions. These are certainly questions about discriminating. And the more you discriminate your no, the easier it will get for you, I promise you. Okay. Here's another question. Can you explain what trauma bonding is again? Well, it happens when both parties have traumatized backgrounds. So both people are survivors of either profound neglect or emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. And we find people that are either as abused as we are, which is typically the case, where one person is the victim and one person's the perpetrator, because we recognize that as love, but it's not love, it's dysfunction. And so when two people get together that can't live with each other and they can't live without each other, then you've got a trauma bond. Because if somebody treats you poorly and you're well, you'll leave the relationship. Whether it's they're never home and they're working all the time, or they are emotionally abusive to you, or they've got a secret addiction that you're having to live with that's driving you crazy, whatever that is unacceptable. And if you grew up in a system where you were abused, or there was alcoholism, or you were gaslit in some ways, you perceive that as normal, but it's not normal. And you know it's not right. It's not healthy is probably a better word than normal for sure. A healthy person would not have stayed in the relationship that Amber Heard and Johnny Depp had based on their report of it. The minute somebody is screaming, abusing, calling somebody names, physically abusive with them, you're out. That's just a no, unless you're traumatized. And if you are, you will stay in that trauma bond until something really bad happens. Oftentimes, this is where we hear about crimes of passion and somebody being shot because it really devolves into something quite dumb, for lack of a better word. So pay attention to what you tolerate, what you put up with, and ask yourself, why do I tolerate this and put up with it? At what point do I say no? And the thing is, for codependents, people are afraid to say no because they're afraid that person will leave them, which is a funny double-edged sword, because on the one hand, they should leave. But on the other hand, when you start to find out and have the experience that when you set boundaries and say no, people actually start to respect you more. You start to get more of what you want, not less of what you want. And the more you say nothing, the more you become a doormat, the more abused you actually get. So you have to take a risk that people aren't going to like you, or maybe they'll leave you, or maybe they'll say something bad about you. But what's more important, your dignity and your well-being, or what somebody else thinks about you that's not well to begin with? We have a question here of, can you please say more about getting clear with your own needs? Maybe even some examples of what those needs could be for a person that's hardly connected to their own self and doesn't have a sense of where to start for that exploration. Well, a basic need is a need for safety, for security, for food, for clothing, for shelter. These are basic needs that we all have. And if those basic needs aren't being met and you don't know it, then you really need to seek professional help, because those are just basic. There are plenty of people that just don't eat all day because they grew up in a deprivation situation where there was never food around. And that's not okay. That's not taking care of yourself. As a functional adult, you should be able to provide yourself with food, clothing, and shelter. You should be in a relationship with somebody that honors that agrees that you should have food, clothing, shelter, safety. That if you lock a door, it's because you need privacy and that person's not banging on the door or breaking the door down, that you're actually respected for what your requests are. And somebody who respects those requests actually helps you get stronger with taking care of yourself. So an example might be, if I come home from work and I'm exhausted and I'm supposed to work out on a Monday night, and I say to my partner, oh, I'm too tired to work out. Someone who wasn't respecting my health and well-being would say, well, you work out too much, or, you work out every Monday night, we don't get to see each other, or you don't need to work out. Somebody who respected me and cared about me would say, you know what, why don't you go work out anyway? You don't have to worry about doing as much as you normally do, but probably if you get on a treadmill for 30 minutes, you're going to feel a lot better. So why don't you go? Maybe I'll go with you, right? They're supportive, they're kind. They're not disrespectful, and they're not tearing you down. First, thank you for everything you do for us. That's my good pleasure. Thank you. I have gotten so much help from you through your books and daily meditations. 4 years of SA sober here, trying to approach my partner about being able to start healthy masturbation again, having given it up since my addiction came to light in 2018. With no fantasy or euphoric recall involved, I feel it's time for me to take control of, and then it drops off. Well, I would agree. 4 years is a very long time to not have what I call a personal sex life. And so I want to encourage you to talk about it, first of all, to your sponsor, to other people in program, so that you're clear about why you want to do it, when you want to do it, how you want to do it, what the purpose of it is for you, and also to understand that we can have exquisite orgasms without fantasy, without any other sort of props if we need them, simply by breathing deeply into the pelvic region, by arousing ourselves in a way that feels good to the body, that's strictly about pleasure. And this is one of those processes of discrimination. It's like tasting wine or listening to music. The more you do it and the more you practice doing it in this healthy way, the more facile the body becomes to respond to it in this way. And part of the problem with excessive, chronic, long-term internet pornography use is it's the only way that people can bring themselves to orgasm. So it's like you have a certain prop, but the prop is the way that your brain is wired. And when you spend 4 years, congratulations to you, of being abstinent, your brain is no longer wired to those images. So now you have the opportunity to explore your eroticism in a deeply personal way without shame. And if your partner is struggling with that, then that requires a longer and deeper conversation between the two of you. But you shouldn't go into shame because your partner's struggling with it 4 years later, nor should you be beating the drum that you've done this for 4 years and you deserve blah, blah, blah. You've got to be very regulated and very centered and very clear that this is what you want and need now. And this also answers the previous person's question of an example of stating one's needs. Okay, another question. How can you discern if you're being too discriminating when it comes to making life decisions? Well, it's very helpful to run it by other people. Human beings are not meant to exist in isolation. We are gregarious creatures. We need connection. We need feedback. We need other people's opinions so that we can weigh out the options for ourselves. Women do this all the time, by the way, when it comes to, what do you think of my hair? Or what do you think of my haircut? Or what do you think about this? How does this look on me? Do you like these shoes? Are they too high? Are these pants too tight? Is this shirt okay? We're constantly checking things out with other people because we want and like mirroring. We want to make sure that, we're checking our reality or perceptions, and that we're not just, kind of like out to lunch in some ways. So why not check out these decisions, these life decisions, with trusted others, with people that we respect, are going to give us good feedback that is discriminating, who know us. I might, if a friend asked me about something, let's say it was something as simple as going shopping with someone, and they say, hey, what do you think about this? I'd say, wow, you know what? That looks kind of cool on you, but it's not really your style. So I don't know how many times you're going to wear that. And that person might say, oh, you're right. If it's a $20 or $40 item, they might say, oh, I'm going to buy it for fun anyway. If it's a $200 item, $400 item, they might think, you know what? I think I'll pass. And that's the kind of feedback that we need. So check it out with other people so that you're not operating in a vacuum. Okay, so some of the daily sex acts for today are to show unconditional love for all you encounter, whether it's the food that you eat for lunch or the person that holds the door open for you, but you also at the same time want to protect your personal boundaries. So just because somebody holds a door open for you, it doesn't mean that you have to go home with them or take them to lunch or give them money. It would be nice, though, if you smiled and you said thank you and you met them with a loving presence, a loving countenance. Because the difference between unconditional love and being indiscriminating, and that you might hold unworthy persons in your heart while keeping them at arm's length. So these are multiple paradoxes, multiple ways of holding these different tensions, if you will, so that it can be both. And then ask yourself, what really attracts you to others? And define your arousal template, whether this is current, certainly not a past one, but your most current arousal template. What is arousing to you? What are all the factors you find sexually stimulating? It could be a person's smile, their sense of humor, their intellect, their physical beauty, the fact that they're athletic or they take care of their bodies. Oftentimes the qualities we fall in love with, we start to ask our partners to dull down. Like we fall in love with people that are sort of adventurous, or they're bold in the way that they do things. And then over time, we start asking them to stop doing those things. And then we're not so attracted to them anymore. So see if you can think about again, what is arousing for you? What's appealing to you? What have you discriminated over the years about what you like and don't like? And more importantly, what you will and won't live with? Because often people that struggle with sex and love addiction struggle to tolerate intimacy with a healthy partner. And that differs from their familiar arousal template, because sex and love addicts can confuse intensity with intimacy. And I'm suggesting we can have both, that we can have intensity through the intimacy that we build with a lover, with a partner, and not just choose people that are dramatic and ultimately painful and cause disruption and destruction in our lives. So how does your present discriminating taste serve your sexual health is a question you want to ask yourself. Am I erring too far on the side of being conservative? Am I still not setting good enough boundaries and saying no, or let me think about it? Where's the middle ground? And the thing is, there are no answers to any of these questions. The older I get, the more I realize I don't know anything. But what I do know is to live in the question, that if I'm posing a question and I'm also paying attention to what's scaring me or why I'm having cold feet about something, it's because I'm in a process of chewing something over, of thinking about all the possibilities. And I think historically, and for many people that are impulsive, they just name that bad. So let me just give you a simple example again. If I go shopping again, it sounds like I'm shopping all the time, I'm not. But if I go shopping and I see something I really like, or I think I like it, but maybe it's kind of expensive and I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I really want to spend the money. There's a time when I used to just buy the thing. It was like, oh my God, that's fabulous, I'm buying it. And I would take it home and I would have this buyer's remorse and even sometimes feel sick that I spent the money because maybe it was too much or I shouldn't have spent it. And then I would either keep the thing and leave it in my closet and eventually wear it, or I take it back, right? And both of those things are problematic. Taking it back is just a waste of time, energy, and money. Like I don't have time to run back and forth to department stores. Leaving it in my closet and sort of acting like it's not there, it feels like shame. Like, oh, I got this thing. I'm having like a postpartum depression with it. So I'll just look in on it on a month or two. But what I do now is I just leave it there. I leave it at the store. And if I forget about it, that means I didn't really want it. If I start to obsess about it for a day, a week, a couple weeks, then I start to realize, oh, I really want this thing, because I then go home and look at or think about, if I were putting clothes on, would I wear these pair of shoes? Or if I'm going out, oh, that pair of shoes would have been really nice. Now I'm starting to see it in my world, and I'm doing kind of a cost benefit analysis of whether or not I would actually really use it and it has meaning to me. Now, shoes are not people, which is why we date. It's why we go out with somebody over and over again. It's why I recommend that people not have sex on the first date, but that you wait, because it's easy to have sex with somebody. It's very difficult to discriminate about whether or not they're right for you. because you don't get to know someone until you spend enough time with them to see what their habits are, what they say. Are they congruent with what they do? How do they comport themselves? Do they have friends? Do you like their friends? How do they get along with their family? Have they been in a job for a period of time, or do they job hop? Like all these things that we see that we don't want to see in the early stages of dating are what make us more discriminating creatures. So this takes practice, like any other practice in our lives. We don't just, pop out and start doing it. We have to start having a keen eye. Have to start thinking about whether or not it's going to be right. And that is a process. And it's not, it is the opposite of being impulsive. 100% opposite of that. It's about being able to hold and wait, to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing, to be willing to give ourselves space to figure something out, and to not be concerned that the other person's getting agitated about it. Because if you're agitated with my process, then that means we probably can't be in a relationship with each other, because I'm going to take my time. I'm going to pay attention to the signs around me. I'm going to try something on to see if it fits, to see if I like it, to see how it's going to go. And you putting pressure on me is not going to speed that process up. In fact, it's going to aggravate you and probably me, in which case we're probably not going to date much longer. So the data will be in the process itself. So I hope that makes sense to people when you think about this topic. All right, so here we are. It's June 1st, which is hardly believable. And I say that every month when we have these conversations. I hope that you discriminate well when you think about what you're doing with your summer, because the summer goes by in a flash. And I don't know about you, but I love the summer. It represents so many different things, especially with reclaiming our lives after this pandemic and being able to go out and see people and laugh and have dinners and have a good time. So be discriminating about where you spend your time, about where and in what venues you wear a mask or don't, and who you spend your time with, because life is short. Life is short, but quite wide. There's a lot for us to experience and taste and try on and be discriminating about. And also let yourself experiment with that. You can go do something that's kooky or fun or out of your wheelhouse, but maybe your discrimination says, you know what, that's just a one-time thing. I'm not going to live there, but I certainly want to try all the things on the buffet of life, but I'm not going to keep doing something over and over again that creates pain or destruction or that's bad for me. So I hope you have a discriminating June, that you enjoy yourself, and I look forward to seeing you all in July. And remember, you can always find us at centerforhealthysex.com and at our various social media platforms. And I'll see you soon.